Hey Reddit, when did your something's not right here gut feeling ever save you? I went to hospital with shortness of breath and my heart racing. They did a chest x-ray, blood test for blood clots, ECG, and a few other tests but all came back normal. After observing me overnight everything still looked good. Oxygen saturation was perfect, my heart rate was still a bit elevated but nothing too crazy, and it seemed that it was likely leftover symptoms from a bad virus that I'd had a week or so earlier. The ER doctor asks me how I would feel if they send me home, and I just had a bad feeling about it all. I told him as such, and that I had no real basis for it, except that I just felt off about it. He said fair enough, let's try one more test, and if that comes back negative then we'll send you up to general medicine and see if they can track something down. The test was a VQ scan that found despite all other tests showing no results for blood clots, I actually had a whole bunch of them in both lungs. I ended up with a diagnosis of unprovoked bilateral pulmonary embolisms, and I'm on blood thinners for life. Super grateful both for the bad feeling and the ER doctor who was willing to listen to it. I woke up from a deep sleep at like 2 AM during a winter storm. Something wasn't right. I immediately went looking for my senior dog and couldn't find her anywhere in the house. My roommates had a tendency to let her out for a walk and forget about her, closing the door. I ran to the front of the house and found her laying on the welcome mat. She was hardly breathing and covered in snow. She had been outside alone for at the very least 5 hours. I moved out shortly after. I was learning violin when I was about 10 from an instructor at my local music shop. I got the weirdest feeling from him, even though he didn't do anything out of the ordinary. I wanted to vomit every time I looked at him, especially his hands. After 4 lessons I told my parents that I had a terrible feeling about him and I never wanted to go back. Luckily, they listened and didn't make me ever go to him again. A few years later he was arrested for molesting multiple of his students. I have no idea how I knew something was off. He never did or said anything but I just felt it. Last year, December 1st, I had slept for almost a week trying to fight what I thought was the flu. Woke up and that exact gut feeling kept on telling me something's not right with me. Called the parents to tell them and then cabbed myself to the emergency room. Took blood, the whole 9 yards, was there for 8 hours. Discharged and sent home. Called the next morning asking me to come back because they found something in my blood. Bacteremia and endocarditis. I was put on penicillin immediately for 2 months. More tests, more things wrong. Went for a specialized test on December 21st. Woke up to them telling me I need surgery as soon as possible. They are trying to find a surgical team. Earliest is the 24th. I go in, and while they are operating I have an ascending aortic aneurysm, and it caused an aortic dissection. They are able to fix it. I've got a synthetic valve in there now. Here's the kicker. I work in a restaurant kitchen, just before the start of the holiday season. Normally most cooks would tough it out and just work. Most think it happens and it'll get better soon. Just keep going. There was just something about the way I was feeling this time that made me go to the hospital. I'm told that if I had done that, I more than likely would have died before my birthday and they would have found out about the aneurysm during the autopsy. That still sends chills down my spine. My best friend works as an emergency room nurse at the same hospital that I was operated on, and she was freaking out internally but kept it together on the outside for me. She explained just how serious this all was after I was in recovery. I've promised to tell her whenever I get that same feeling again. There's a very fun road that gets you from Niederndorf to Vach or back in Germany. You can go 50 or 60 clicks along smooth tight turns and little rolling hills. All around it for acres and acres are fields of whatever's in season and no intersections for several kilometers. It's a very fun road to go too fast on. This day, something like wheat was in and it was high. I couldn't see around the corners, but I knew the road well and was staying in my lane. And I was going fast and smiling. About halfway in, I heard a voice in my head as clear as if the speaker were sitting next to me and it said, "You need to slow down." It was startling and I braked immediately. 2 seconds later I come through one of the turns and into the end of a combine taking up both lanes and moving slowly. I barely stopped in time. Those extra 2 seconds of break time saved a Volvo at least, but I'm pretty sure they saved my life too. I was walking out of a grocery store when I saw this kid about to cross the road. Something came over me and I yanked him back onto the sidewalk. Not even a second later a truck came flying past. He was probably around 7 or 8ish. When I was in college, I lived in a sketchy part of Chicago, Humboldt Park/Logan Square before gentrification. I liked to take late night strolls, even when I was living in that neighborhood as a 20-year-old woman. Yeah, I know. Pretty dumb of me. One night, I was feeling stressed out, so I embarked on one of my late night strolls. I was walking along a somewhat busy road. Cars were zooming past me. Pretty normal. I wasn't paying much attention because I was too wrapped up in whatever was stressing me out that night. Suddenly, a chill shot up my spine. Hypervigilance washed over me and I became more alert than I had ever been. Something was wrong. Someone was watching me. I quickly spotted a car. It was driving in the opposite direction, a little slower than usual. It was too dark for me to see anyone inside the car, and the car was pretty unassuming. But I still knew something was off. They were watching me. I just knew. The car drove past me and then made a U-turn. Now it was right behind me, creeping along the curb. Luckily, there was a Walgreens a few blocks ahead. I started walking faster, and the car eventually sped past me and disappeared into a corner. I somehow knew I wasn't safe yet, so I still sprinted to Walgreens. I told the security guard what happened, and we both went outside. The car was parked up the street, about 50 to 100 feet away. The security guard was a big guy who looked intimidating. He marched toward the car, and the car immediately backed up, made a U-turn, and then booked it out of there. The security guard called the cops, and they drove me home. I never took a late night stroll again. My gut made me more alert, but it was really the security guard who saved my life. I'm positive that, if he wasn't there that night, something bad would have happened to me. I wish I could find that security guard to thank him. I went out with my best friend on New Year's last year and were having drinks with her friends when I realized I was out of cigarettes. I left for a few minutes to walk over and grab a pack and ended up talking to a homeless guy for a while, and when I went over to the entrance of the bar she was outside and said something mean to me for no reason and walked off. I was confused, so I decided it would be good if I took a walk to let her cool off and then figure out what she was upset about. I was going to walk down the street for a bit, but something told me to turn left, walking behind the bar and then turning to the side of the bar when I see a girl laying down on the sidewalk and people walking by her. As I'm walking over to help, I realize it's my friend and she's not very conscious. She was probably drugged while I was getting smokes, and who knows what would have happened if I hadn't decided to go that way. Scares the shit out of me. Creds to my dad for this one. Back in 2011, my dad and I was driving down the country for New Year's Eve. Suddenly he goes quiet, kind of starts breathing slow and steady, and tells me to look up the road. He was so calm and focused. I look up and see a car spinning in the middle of the freeway, ramping up speed and knocking cars off the road. This is Scandinavia, winter, pretty much on ice. I imagine the driver of that car hoping, just hoping. So my dad proceeds to accelerate towards the guy spinning, which didn't even occur to me was weird. He was just so calm, which made me calm. The car hits us on my dad's side. Half a second earlier my dad turned slightly right, which was just enough for the car to push us out of the road and completely safe into a snow hill. I realized a bit later that a lamppost on that same side we flew off to had crushed the back right side of our car, just missing the angle that would have hit me. Years later I realized the reason my dad sped up the vehicle, getting hit by that car, was a question of when, not if, and if he had not accelerated, that lamppost would have been my death. After that occurrence my pulse always drops in pressure situations. I was walking to the barber shop, and for some reason, everything just felt off. I ignored the feeling, but every step I took just made me feel like something wasn't right, so I decided to just go grab some food and come back. While I was eating I saw police cars and ambulances driving to around where I was before. It turns out there was a murder. Now I always listen to my gut feeling. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. Let us know your thoughts on this topic. See you soon.